Hey, uh, this video is going to be the second part of the introduction to the Metamorphoses by Ovid. This introduction was written by Robert Squillace so that he gains credit for this beautifully made introduction. I am I don't know how far along I am percentage wise, but I'm not very far. So let's get to it. It is unlikely that any evidence will ever be produced to establish what specific incidents, if any, prompted Augustus to banish his city's leading poet. But the fundamental opposition between their outlooks, regardless of how it manifested itself in action, is clear enough without recourse to any historical detective work. In particular, each envisions the idea of order in an entirely different way, a disparity that parallels the manner in which Ovid reorganized the genre of epic in opposition to his poetic forebears. This distinction is not simple. To identify Augustus with repressive, totalitarian control, and Ovid with anarchic subversion of all authority, poetic as well as political, would caricature their positions. Augustan order, though it concentrated a good deal of power in the hands of a single man, was a surprisingly informal affair, resting as much on recognition of the emperor's personal precedence as it did on any statutory definition of his precise governmental role. The Senate, supreme governing body of the old Roman Republic, continued to meet for generations, though its role and influence, in any case greatly restricted by the powers concentrated in the emperor's person, differed from one regime to the next. Augustus himself preferred to be addressed as princeps, roughly first citizen, rather than imperator, emperor. Nor, contrary to the impression left by a number of Hollywood's sordid scandal epics, did the empire curtail rights enjoyed by ordinary citizens under the Republic. Indeed, the imperial era saw a rapid extension of Roman citizenship to the masses of non-Italian peoples, and a relative improvement in the still miserable conditions of slave life, though such trends were not yet necessarily evident in Ovid's lifetime. But the purpose of Augustan order to mitigate or even suppress the danger personal desire poses to the smooth conduct of public life sorts very ill with the themes of Ovidian poetry. The Metamorphoses, in particular, not only identifies desire as the sovereign power of the universe, but does so within the framework of a genre, epic, which traditionally used to celebrate the triumph of masculine restraint over feminine desire. He thus implicitly challenges the imperial and epic visions simultaneously. Achilles, after all, achieves his moment of enlightened maturity in the final book of the Iliad when he relinquishes the wrath with which his passions, for Briseis, his war prize, and for his companion/lover Patroclus, with which his passions fill his human breast. His Trojan rival, Hector, rejects the feminine even more explicitly, putting aside his wife's fear in order to give his life for his city. In Homer's other epic, Odysseus must keep himself in check and coolly plot the demise of the suitors who consume his household, hiding not only his feeling but even his own identity. Indeed, Augustus had helped confirm for his own generation the value of heroic conquest over selfish passions by commissioning Virgil's Aeneid, the protagonist of which must abandon his lover to her death at the behest of the gods. The foundation of Rome itself depended on his compliance. Both Virgil and Augustus, after all, had endured the violent chaos of the Roman civil wars, which had ended when Ovid was still a child. The endorsement of masculine suppression of feeling was far more ambiguous in these earlier epics than ancient commentators tended to assume. But the mere fact they were capable of being mistaken for such celebrations of martial valor, allowed them actually to be used to support the social dissemination of such values. The Metamorphoses, which avoids narrating the heroic exploits of even of those martial figures it does depict, Hercules, Theseus, Aeneas, and so forth, declares its suspicion of the power of restraint and even of power itself virtually from its beginning. Ovid's extremely influential vision of the Golden Age, Shakespeare echoes it in Gonzalo's famous speech about humanity's natural insolence in Act 2, Scene 1 of The Tempest. And Kaixe virtually quotes it as an old man's unheeded anti-imperial plea in the Lusaids. So, Ovid's work identifies human bliss with the absence of any structures of control. There was no fear of punishment. No threatening words were to be read on brazen tablets. No suppliant throng gazed fearfully upon its judge's face, but without judges lived secure. Indeed, the exertion of power over the unwilling earth to make it bring forth crops, metals, and precious stones, the defining elements of civilization, is pictured as kind of a rape. The first of many images of enforced domination in our rape-haunted text. Ooh, rape-haunted text? Damn. We'll see how it goes. Rape-haunted, That's the worst description I've ever heard of a book. A rape-haunted text. Yeah. Alright, let's do it. Moreover, Jupiter, to whom Augustus is compared on several occasions in an ostensibly flattering manner, has express responsibility for the introduction of seasonal change, tellingly imagined by Ovid not as the imposition of order for human benefit by a god devoted to humanity, as in the Bible's book of Genesis, which I'm reading, by the way, and you should check out. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. And that's a quote from Genesis 8:22. As in the book of Genesis, that quote, God promises Noah after the flood, but as a that's the phrase that God promises Noah after the flood, that as long as the earth remaineth, there will be all these things that will remain as well. I guess that's the covenant that he makes, the covenant of the ark. All right. So Ovid does not represent God or the Jupiter as this benevolent father figure, but as a draconian curtailing of the eternal summer that had theretofore blessed human beings. In the Metamorphoses, creation itself does not resume after Jupiter's vengeful flood by clear and orderly divine plan. In the Metamorphoses, creation itself does not resume after Jupiter's vengeful flood by clear and orderly divine plan, but from the merciful endurance of primal chaos, of the disorderly union of opposites that endures even at the root of order. For when moisture and heat unite, life is conceived, and from these two sources all living things spring. And, though fire and water are naturally at enmity, still heat and moisture produce all things, and this inharmonious harmony is fitted to the growth of life. I like those Aristotelian elements. The first tale followed the water's recession, and the recreation of humanity confirms the primacy of desire. Apollo, the god of rationality and daylight, foolishly boasts that the martial power of his arrows surpasses the gentle shafts of Cupid, only to be stricken by the son of Venus with an unquenchable lust for the horrified Daphne. Oof. His pursuit of her may not end in the literal rape that concludes so many other tales, but the outcome nonetheless suggests that power is actually exerted, not for public benefit or in self-restraint, but in order to forcefully dominate the desired object. The leaves of the laurel tree into which Daphne has been unwillingly transformed. She had prayed for escape through the loss of her beauty, but that beauty is all her transformation preserves. Become symbols of conquest. With you shall Roman generals wreath their heads, when shouts of joy shall acclaim their triumphant, long processions climb the Capitol. You, at Augustus's portals, shall stand a trusty guard, and keep watch over the civic crown of oak which hangs between. What does that even mean? With you shall Roman generals wreath their heads. Oh, because Daphne had been transformed into a laurel, and so, okay, with you, and the Roman generals shall be wreathed with your laurel leaves upon their heads. So that's how the conquest comes in. The Roman generals conquest the leaves of Daphne and put them on their head, and so even though she had been transformed, she still conquested. Gentler rebukes of the epic spirit also abound in the Metamorphoses carnivalesque inversion of many of its own genre's conventions, as when Ovid parodies the epic list. A famous example is the litany of the Greek ships that sailed to reclaim Helen in the Iliad, by detailing the name, parentage, and illustrious feats of each of Actaeon's dogs. Yeah, I remember that in the Iliad. That was a dry chapter. Perhaps the only narrative poet funnier than Ovid is Chaucer, and all clowns implicitly deride the sort of dignitas, worth, merit, and auctoritas, responsibility, or power, on which Augustan order was founded. I have to say that Chaucer is pretty good. I mean, I haven't read much of him, but what I've read of him is really good. But I do have to say that Don Quixote is the funniest book I've ever read. So, but it's not a poem, so I'll give it to him. I'll give it to this guy. All right. I think that's gonna be that for this video. All right. I'll see you guys later in part 3 of this very beautiful introduction.